Hello, my name is Kim Page, and I am a candidate for a doctorate in learning and leadership at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. The following is a research proposal entitled Why Did They Leak? A Qualitative Approach to Repairing the STEM Pipeline. Today's presentation will include an introduction, definitions, brief overview of a theoretical framework and literature review, as well as proposing some research questions. At the end of the presentation, I will propose a methodology in which I hope to use to potentially answer some of my research questions. Presently in the United States, there is a wide gap in economic attainment based on race. Approximately 54% of white children are expected to surpass their parents economically, while only 23% of Black children are expected to either meet or surpass their parents economically. Additionally, in the United States, there is an inverse relationship between economic attainment and incarceration. Incarcerated individuals are more likely to come from low-income households. Furthermore, lack of education is highly correlated with incarceration. Only 6% of the entire inmate population in the United States has attended college or a post-secondary institution. Less than half of 1% of all African Americans that are incarcerated in the United States have attended school past high school. In fact, 1 in 3 Black males in the United States will be imprisoned at some point in their lifetime. It has been suggested that increasing graduation rates of African Americans may do the following. First, increasing these rates may decrease incarceration rates. As we saw on the previous slide, incarceration and education are closely linked. Incarceration rates are estimated to decrease by as much as 100,000 people per year for every 5% increase in graduation rates. Furthermore, increasing graduation rates may reduce crime-related costs by $18.5 billion annually. States spend more than $25,000 per year on incarceration for each individual, as opposed to $12,000 per year on schooling. And finally, increasing graduation rates of African Americans by 5% may help bridge the equity gap that is seen between white and African Americans. Now, let's do an overview of the outlook of science, technology, mathematics, and engineering, or STEM for short, in the United States. One of the biggest areas of opportunity for African American and Hispanic Americans to bridge the economic and educational gap is in STEM. The current STEM workforce is aging, with more than half of the current workforce to be eligible to retire within the next 10 years. In 2012, the Office of the President of the United States said that we need to increase the number of STEM graduates by 34% in order to graduate an additional 1 million students by 2022. 1 million graduates will help fill the gaps left by retiring workers and fill any new jobs that may come available in technology and e-commerce. Furthermore, colleges have been charged to graduate more STEM graduates, particularly those from minority groups and female students. The easiest growth here would be with underrepresented minority groups. Currently, Black and Hispanic Americans make up 29% of the population, but only 16% of the STEM workforce. In addition to filling the need for millions of STEM jobs, there is an economical advantage to majoring in a STEM field. Students that graduate with a STEM major are more likely to find employment after graduation and are expected to receive higher paying salaries as compared to their non-STEM peers. A drastic increase in the number of underrepresented minority STEM graduates could also help close the equity gap in the United States. So one suggestion for bridging the equity gap and reducing the incarceration levels of men in the United States is to increase the number of college graduates, particularly those in science, technology, mathematics, and engineering. There is an issue with inequity in the number of minority students in STEM majors. There are enumerated studies out there that paint the same picture. This particular study is a smaller study, but one that is more recent. This is based on a study of nearly 6,000 students that initially began a 4-year degree with a STEM major declared. Nearly 60% of white students that started with a STEM major completed their degree within 6 years, as compared to 43% of Hispanic students and 34% of Black students. Furthermore, 40% of Black students switched majors from a STEM major to a non-STEM major, and 26% of Black students left school altogether. There were similar trends seen with Hispanic students. If it isn't already evident, the issue here is multifaceted. We need more STEM graduates in the United States. There is a call to graduate an additional 1 million students by 2022. There's a large racial disparity in wealth and educational attainment in the United States. Education may help decrease incarceration rates and bridge the equity gap. However, students of color face additional challenges which we will address in the literature review. The purpose of this study is to examine efforts to increase retention rates of underrepresented minority students in STEM majors at a large public university in the Southeast United States. A secondary purpose of this study is to assess student perceptions for withdrawing from the STEM pipeline and identify potential preventative measures that a university could take to reduce the number of underrepresented minority students that withdraw from STEM majors. Before we move on, let's define some of the words that commonly appear in the literature. A first-generation student is a student where neither parent has attained a 4-year degree. Students that have a parent with an associate's degree or some college but no bachelor's degree are also considered first-generation students. Persistence is defined as continuing and completing a program in the same major at the same university. Retention is the rate at which a student enters the university and eventually graduates. STEM retention is defined as the rate at which a student has declared a STEM major at any point in their university experience, remains enrolled at that particular university, and graduates with a STEM degree from that university. A STEM major is a student with a major in a hard science, like biology or chemistry, a technology field, an engineering major, or a mathematics major. This also includes students who major in things like agribusiness and agriscience and actuarial science. And then finally, an underrepresented minority student, or URM for short, is a student that identifies ethnically or racially as something other than white or Asian. Now, let's look at a couple of theories that guide this research. The first theory is the leaky STEM pipeline. There has been a push for students to enter the STEM pipeline and work towards STEM degrees. While it's unknown where the phrase STEM pipeline originated, it has become a way of describing the pathway from high school education to a post-secondary degree and eventually a career in the STEM discipline. In 2005, Clark Blickenstaff introduced the idea that the STEM pipeline is leaky. According to the STEM leaky pipeline theory, there's a high percentage of underrepresented minority students and female students that leave STEM majors or the university altogether. When someone leaves the STEM pipeline by changing majors or withdrawing from the university, they are considered to have leaked from the pipeline. Currently, there is a large push for the leaky pipeline to be repaired. Next, let's look at theories as to why the STEM leaky pipeline exists for underrepresented minority students. First, it's important to consider that retention is a measure of funding for public universities. It is important to retain and graduate students so that universities can continue to receive state funding. Underrepresented minorities are at the highest risk of leaking from the STEM pipeline. Theories behind this suggest that underrepresented minorities are more likely to be first-generation college students, have a lack of social support from friends and family, have a lack of academic support, have a lack of role models. That means they don't typically see other underrepresented minorities represented in the STEM field. They're also underprepared for the rigors of college courses, face racial stereotyping, and financial barriers. Finally, let's look at the theoretical framework that will guide the rest of this proposal. The present proposed study will use a transformative framework as it is focused on marginalized groups. Additionally, one purpose of this study is to mobilize individuals to improve society, which is a hallmark of the transformative framework. Critical race theory is the perspective lens in this study. One primary goal of critical race theory is to address inequalities experienced by individuals of color, and there are enumerated inequalities for minority representation in STEM. This study also borrows from existential phenomenology, since it wants to understand the phenomenon that causes underrepresented minority students to leak from the STEM pipeline. Now, let's do a brief overview of some of the remaining literature that was used to guide this research proposal. A recent Google Scholar search of the phrase STEM minority retention revealed 85,900 results, most of which were published in the last 5 years. Since there has been a call for colleges and universities to graduate an additional 1 million STEM students by 2022 in order to fill empty employment slots left by the retiring members of the STEM workforce, many colleges and universities have shifted their focus to increasing the retention and persistent rates of STEM majors, particularly underrepresented minority students. Here are some of the efforts to fix the leaky pipeline. The current leaky pipeline in student retention frameworks consists mostly of quantitative analysis. There has been very little qualitative analysis done. Some of the things that universities have done include summer bridge programs and first-year seminars. The first-year seminars and summer bridge programs have reported mixed levels of success. One of the more successful programs was implemented at multiple Cal State campuses. It included a three-pronged approach to university success with retaining underrepresented minority students in STEM fields. The first of the three prongs was a summer bridge program, followed by a learning community and redesigned courses to include collaborative assignments. While this particular program was successful, it was funded by grant money and will not be able to sustain without further funding. Another program that was successful used grant money to pay underrepresented minority students stipends for participating in summer bridge programs and passing their gateway mathematics courses. Throughout the program, a student could earn more than $1,200 cash for their participation. Many STEM intervention programs for URM students are unsustainable due to costs. Other summer bridge programs and first-year seminar programs have reported little to no success. These programs are often unsuccessful because they are taught by STEM faculty and not faculty that are trained in student success theories. Additionally, it has been stated that URM students are less likely to self-select into high-impact courses such as first-year seminars, summer bridge programs, and learning communities, despite these programs providing URM students with more educational benefits than white students. Therefore, summer bridge programs may not be sustainable or effective programs for increasing the success of URM students in STEM majors. One cost-effective way to increase student success is to redesign Gateway STEM courses to include high-impact practices. Female URM students were more likely to be successful in small classes and learning communities with hands-on coursework. Simply redesigning STEM courses to include more opportunities for hands-on learning and collaborative work showed higher levels of successful completion as compared to the traditional lecture-style STEM class at the same university. We will conclude our overview of the literature by looking at the limited qualitative approaches to repairing the STEM pipeline. One study interviewed several underrepresented minority students that had completed their STEM degrees and asked the graduates about their reasons for persistence. Familial support and financial interventions were themes as to why these students persisted. Familial support is consistent with first-generation student success factors found in the quantitative studies by Tinto. Another study used a mixed methods approach of longitudinal data collection, surveys, and interviews to characterize one reason for underrepresented minority departure from the STEM pipeline. That one characteristic was anxiety from being stereotyped. While this study provided interesting insights, the interviews conducted were very surface level and did not include in-depth questioning to get to the core of the participants' experiences. Finally, a study by Palmer, Maramba, and Dancy interviewed 5 URM students presently enrolled in STEM majors at a large, predominantly white institution and asked them their reason for persisting in a STEM major. Common themes included high school preparation, peer support, and involvement in STEM-related activities on campus. While the qualitative studies conducted here have contributed to the body of work, none of these studies ask URM students that have leaked from the pipeline to reflect on their experience and see what could have been done in order to retain them in a STEM field. In summary of the literature, there is a strong need to increase the number of URM graduates in STEM fields. The Office of the President has requested that colleges and universities graduate an additional 1 million STEM majors by 2022, which is a 34% increase from 10 years ago. Underrepresented minority students have multifaceted challenges that lead to their success in STEM fields. Of those include first-generation student challenges, lack of role models, lack of familial support, financial barriers, and underpreparedness for the rigor of college courses. Colleges have done some preventative measures based on the results of quantitative studies, but there's been mixed success in those programs. Some of those programs included summer bridge programs, first-year student success programs, and high-impact practices in the classroom. So now let's look at our overarching research questions. Our first research question is, why do underrepresented minority students leak from the STEM pipeline? We would like to do this from the student perspective. Previous studies have just looked at quantitative reasons and found similarities between students that have leaked from the pipeline. Additionally, we want to know what the university can do to help and prevent future generations of URM students from leaking from the STEM pipeline. Finally, let's look at the methodology for the proposed research. The plan is to use existential phenomenology in order to answer our research questions. The first step of existential phenomenology is selecting participants. For this particular study, it is anticipated that 7 to 10 underrepresented minority students that are currently enrolled at a large university in the Southeast United States that initially started in a STEM major but leaked from the STEM pipeline will be chosen. It is preferable that these students are also first-generation students, but if enough first-generation underrepresented minority students cannot be obtained for this study, the first-generation limitation will be lifted. The next step is to engage in bracketing. Bracketing with a trained phenomenologist will happen before any participant interviews are done. Bracketing is an essential part of phenomenological research as it helps the researcher identify their biases and experiences so that they can approach the phenomenon with a fresh perspective. The bracketing interview is the first step in phenomenological reduction. After a bracketing interview is complete and IRB permission is obtained, a pilot interview will be done as well to help the primary researcher with any potential issues that may come up during regular research. The next step is to interview participants. Participants will be interviewed in a setting that is central to student life, like the library or the student union. The researcher will make notes of the atmosphere and the body language of the participant and any other setting notes that might be important. All interviews will be recorded and participant consent will be obtained. Additionally, participants will have the option to choose a pseudonym. All participants will be asked the same initial leading statement. Please tell me why you changed your major from whatever their major was to whatever their major is. The participant may be asked follow-up questions like, can you tell me more about this, or how did that make you feel, for additional depth and clarity. Next, interviews will be transcribed and looked at by the primary researcher and a transdisciplinary phenomenological group. Major statements from these interviews will be highlighted, and a thematic structure will be built off major statements to find overarching themes. Themes will be sent back to the phenomenology group and to the participants for verification before any conclusions and next steps are made in the process of research. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions about my research, please email me at the following contact information. Here is a partial list of references and resources that guided my research. Here are some additional references that guided my research. And thank you to people who continue to make free resources for providing excellent looking presentations.